Around the year 1200 BC, the ancient world was shaken by a catastrophe so immense that entire civilizations disappeared within a single generation. Kingdoms that had dominated the eastern Mediterranean for centuries collapsed one after another. Great palaces burned, royal dynasties vanished, long-established trade routes broke apart, and cities that had once echoed with the sounds of merchants, priests, and kings fell into silence. For the people living through those years, it must have felt as though the world itself was ending. The mighty Hittite Empire, one of the greatest powers of the Bronze Age, fragmented under the combined weight of internal struggles, economic decline, and the devastating movements of mysterious raiders remembered in history as the Sea Peoples. Across Anatolia, uncertainty replaced order. Regional governors lost authority. Fortified cities struggled to defend themselves, and populations moved in search of security and opportunity. Yet history often follows an unexpected path. Where one civilization disappears, another quietly begins to emerge. In the fertile valleys of western Anatolia, far from the ruined imperial capitals of central Anatolia, communities adapted instead of collapsing. They reorganized, strengthened local traditions, and gradually built the foundations of a kingdom that would one day astonish the ancient world with its wealth. That kingdom would become Lydia. Its capital would be Sardis. Its rulers would challenge empires. Its craftsmen would forever change the way humanity conducted trade. And its legacy would survive long after its kings had vanished into history. The story of Lydia does not begin with unimaginable riches or legendary kings. It begins with uncertainty, resilience, and ordinary communities trying to survive during one of history's greatest periods of upheaval. Archaeology has revealed that during the centuries immediately following the Bronze Age collapse, the Hermas River Valley became home to growing settlements whose people were already developing a distinctive identity. Modern excavations at Sardis, Ben Teep, and numerous smaller settlements scattered across western Anatolia have uncovered traces of these early communities buried beneath thousands of years of later construction. Each discovery adds another piece to a puzzle that remained hidden for over 3,000 years. The deepest archaeological layers at Sardis preserve evidence of settlements dating to roughly 1200 to 1000 BC. These earliest remains reveal neither a sudden arrival of foreign conquerors, nor the complete replacement of earlier populations. Instead, they suggest continuity. Communities adapted existing traditions while gradually creating something new. The pottery left behind by these early inhabitants provides some of the clearest evidence. Simple at first glance, these ceramic vessels reveal remarkable craftsmanship. Many display carefully burnished surfaces that still catch the light despite their immense age. Others feature geometric decorations carved with impressive precision. The shapes of bowls, storage jars, and drinking vessels would eventually become unmistakable hallmarks of later Lydian culture. To archaeologists, pottery is more than broken clay. It records habits, technology, trade, and identity. Each vessel reflects choices made by the people who created it, the clay they selected, the methods they used, the temperatures reached inside their kilns. Even decorative patterns reveal traditions passed from one generation to the next. The ceramics emerging from these early settlements show clear connections to older Anatolian traditions. Yet they also display innovations that distinguish them from neighboring cultures. They belong neither entirely to the past, nor completely to the future. They belong to a people finding their own path. Nearby excavations have uncovered bronze tools buried alongside these ceramics. Fibulae used to fasten clothing, agricultural implements worn smooth by years of labor, daggers whose edges once reflected sunlight during uncertain times. These objects reveal a society that remained technically skilled despite the collapse surrounding them. The Bronze Age may have ended, but craftsmanship had not. Agriculture continued, metalworking survived, communities endured. Perhaps even more revealing are the burial customs preserved across the landscape. Not far from Sardis lies Bentip, a vast cemetery whose name today means the Thousand Hills. The rolling mounds dominating the countryside appear almost natural from a distance. Yet beneath many of them lie ancient tombs. Some belong to the famous kings of Lydia. Others reach much deeper into history. Archaeological evidence indicates that parts of this necropolis were already in use during the earliest Iron Age, long before Lydia became wealthy, long before its rulers built colossal monuments. Families were burying their dead here. The earliest graves contained cremated remains carefully placed inside ceramic urns. Beside them rested bronze ornaments, weapons, simple jewelry, and vessels perhaps intended to accompany the deceased into the next world. These burials reveal something important about the people themselves. Death was not viewed merely as an ending. It required ceremony, preparation, respect. The living invested valuable resources into honoring those who had passed away. Some graves contain another remarkable clue. Horse bits, harness fittings, fragments associated with chariots or mounted travel. These discoveries suggest that horses already occupied an important place within early Lydian society, whether used in warfare, transportation, or as symbols of status. Horses would eventually become one of Lydia's greatest military strengths. Their importance can already be seen in these early burials. Long before written records began, the language spoken by these communities also carried clues about who they were. Centuries later, inscriptions carved in a stone would preserve the Lydian language. Modern linguists have shown that it belongs to the Anatolian branch of the Indo-European language family. Its closest relatives included Hittite, Luwian, and several other ancient languages once spoken across Anatolia. This relationship tells an important story. The Lydians were not isolated newcomers suddenly appearing after the Bronze Age collapse. Their roots stretched deep into the ancient cultural landscape of Anatolia itself. Their language preserved echoes of civilizations that had flourished centuries earlier. At the same time, it evolved in its own distinctive direction. When scholars compare surviving inscriptions, they find hundreds of words sharing common ancestry with Hittite, words describing family, nature, kingship, the human body, fundamental concepts that often remain remarkably stable over long periods of history. Even royal terminology preserves fascinating connections. The Lydian word associated with kingship reflects traditions reaching back into the earlier Anatolian world. Religious vocabulary similarly preserves traces of ancient ritual practices shared with neighboring cultures. Yet Lydian was never simply a copy of older languages. It developed its own sound, its own rhythm, its own identity. Over generations, contact with Greek communities along the Aegean coast introduced new influences. Interactions with Phrygian neighbors shaped pronunciation and vocabulary. Trade connected people speaking different languages. Ideas crossed borders alongside merchants. The result was a language reflecting both continuity and adaptation. A perfect mirror of Lydian history itself. Geography also favored these emerging communities in extraordinary ways. The Hermus River, known in antiquity as the Hermos, flows westward from Anatolia's interior toward the Aegean Sea. Its waters cross broad, fertile plains before emptying near the modern Turkish coast. This valley became the heartland of Lydia. Its importance cannot be overstated. Few places in Western Anatolia offered so many advantages at once. Seasonal flooding enriched the surrounding fields with fresh alluvial soil. Farmers could cultivate grain, raise livestock, plant vineyards, and harvest crops capable of supporting growing populations. Archaeological surveys have identified numerous early farmsteads scattered throughout the valley. Grinding stones, storage pits, agricultural tools. Everything points toward organized farming communities producing more than they immediately consumed. Surplus changed everything. Once food production exceeded immediate needs, specialists could emerge. Some people devoted themselves to metalworking. Others became traders, craftsmen, builders, religious leaders. Economic complexity slowly followed agricultural stability. Nature had provided another extraordinary gift. The rivers flowing through Lydia carried more than water. Within their sands lay particles of gold. For countless generations, seasonal floods washed precious metals down from surrounding mountains. The Pactolus River, a tributary flowing past Sardis, became especially famous for its gold-bearing sediments. Long before coins existed, long before kings filled enormous treasuries, people had already begun collecting these shining fragments. Nearby mountains contained valuable silver deposits as well. Evidence of early mining appears during precisely this formative period. Primitive extraction sites, smelting installations, stone hammers, simple furnaces. None of these operations approached the industrial scale later achieved under Lydian kings. Yet they demonstrate something significant. These communities already recognize the extraordinary wealth hidden beneath their landscape. Gold attracted trade. Silver encouraged exchange. Mineral resources created opportunities unavailable to many neighboring regions. Geography shaped politics as surely as it shaped agriculture. The Hermus Valley formed a natural corridor linking central Anatolia with the Aegean coast. Merchants moving between inland resources and maritime markets naturally passed through this region. Communities controlling the valley gained influence over trade itself. Rivers also served as highways, transporting goods, ideas, people, messages. During periods when surrounding regions struggled with instability, the valley's natural defenses offered additional security. Hills protected settlements. River bends created defensive positions. Scattered communities remained connected without becoming isolated. As neighboring powers weakened, these settlements gradually strengthened. Over generations, independent villages increasingly recognized common interests. Leadership became more organized. Local chiefs gained influence beyond their immediate communities. Eventually, power began concentrating around one settlement in particular, Sardis. Its location was nearly ideal, positioned where fertile farmland, mineral resources, and important trade routes converged. Sardis naturally attracted wealth and population. What began as a regional center slowly transformed into the political heart of an emerging kingdom. Archaeology suggests that during the 10th and 9th centuries BC, this process accelerated. Fortifications appeared. Administrative buildings became more substantial. Burial monuments grew larger. The archaeological record reveals increasing social hierarchy. Some individuals possessed greater wealth than others. Some families enjoyed higher status. Political authority was becoming centralized. Later Greek writers remembered these early centuries through stories of a dynasty known as the Heraclids. According to Herodotus, they ruled Lydia for more than 5 centuries before another family seized power. Modern historians treat such precise numbers cautiously. Ancient genealogies often blended history with legend. Yet beneath the myths may lie genuine memories. Long-lasting ruling families often become surrounded by heroic stories. Historical events gradually merge with oral tradition. Exagdatisfade. Names change. Narratives become embellished. But the existence of an early royal dynasty itself remains entirely plausible. Archaeological evidence strongly supports the emergence of centralized kingship during precisely this period. The rulers remembered as Heraclids appear to have established many institutions that would define Lydia for centuries. Royal authority expanded gradually rather than suddenly. Instead of replacing every local leader, early kings likely governed through alliances. Local nobles retained influence over their own territories. In return, they acknowledged the authority of a paramount ruler during warfare, diplomacy, and major religious ceremonies. This system reflected practical realities. Western Anatolia contained diverse communities spread across fertile valleys and rugged hills. Direct bureaucratic control over every village would have been nearly impossible. Networks of loyalty proved far more effective. Kings rewarded faithful nobles with prestige. Land, military responsibilities. In return, nobles supplied troops, collected tribute, and reinforced royal authority. Military organization also evolved during these formative centuries. The spread of iron technology transformed warfare across Anatolia. Iron weapons gradually replaced bronze, producing stronger blades that could better withstand prolonged combat. Communities able to master ironworking gained important military advantages over rivals still relying primarily on older technologies. The Lydians proved particularly successful in adopting these innovations. Horse breeding also expanded. The broad grasslands of the Hermus Valley offered ideal conditions for raising powerful cavalry mounts. Over time, mounted warriors became one of Lydia's defining military strengths. Their speed allowed rapid movement across the kingdom. Their mobility enabled rulers to project authority over distant territories. Long before foreign observers praised Lydian cavalry, Its foundations were already taking shape among these early communities. Religion remained equally central to daily life. Throughout Anatolia, the worship of powerful mother goddesses stretched back thousands of years. Among the emerging Lydians, the Great Mother, later identified with Cybele, occupied a place of extraordinary importance. She represented fertility, nature, protection, the mountains themselves. Sanctuaries dedicated to her gradually appeared across the landscape. Excavations reveal shrines where offerings accumulated over generations. Animal bones, ceramic vessels, figurines, burned remains from ritual ceremonies. These sacred places became centers not only of worship, but also of political legitimacy. Kings ruled not merely through military strength. They ruled with divine approval. Religion reinforced authority. Authority protected religion. As contact with Greek communities increased along the coast, new religious ideas entered Lydia as well. Rather than replacing older beliefs, they blended together. Greek deities found places beside Anatolian traditions. Architectural styles merged. Artistic motifs crossed cultural boundaries. This pattern would become one of Lydia's greatest strengths. Its civilization rarely rejected outside influences. Instead, it absorbed them, reshaped them, and made them unmistakably its own. Trade accelerated this cultural exchange. Merchants carried more than goods. They carried stories, religious ideas, technologies, artistic styles. Every caravan arriving from inland Anatolia, every ship docking along the nearby coast, every foreign craftsman settling within Lydian territory added another thread to the kingdom's growing cultural tapestry. And this was only the beginning. The centuries ahead would transform these resilient river communities into one of the richest kingdoms the ancient world had ever seen, and from their capital at Sardis, they would soon begin shaping the destiny of the entire Mediterranean. The transformation of Sardis from an important regional settlement into the political heart of Lydia did not happen in a single lifetime. It unfolded gradually, generation after generation, as rulers consolidated authority, expanded their influence, and created institutions capable of holding together a growing kingdom. To the people living in Western Anatolia during the early Iron Age, this slow evolution may not have seemed remarkable at all. Each generation simply inherited the world left by the one before it. Villages became towns. Local leaders became nobles. Regional chiefs became kings. Only centuries later would historians recognize that an entirely new civilization had quietly emerged from the ruins of the Bronze Age. The dynasty, remembered by later Greek writers as the Heraclids, occupied a central place in this transformation. Although the details preserved in ancient literature often blend legend with historical memory, archaeology paints a picture that fits surprisingly well with the general outline of those traditions. Rather than imagining an uninterrupted line of perfectly documented monarchs stretching across 5 centuries, historians today see the Heraclid narrative as preserving the memory of a long period during which royal institutions matured and political authority became increasingly centralized. Herodotus tells us that the Heraclids ruled Lydia for 505 years across 22 generations. Whether those exact numbers are accurate remains impossible to determine. Ancient historians often favored symmetrical chronologies and idealized genealogies. Yet the broader idea of a long-lasting royal house establishing traditions that later dynasties inherited appears entirely consistent with the archaeological evidence emerging from Sardis. Excavations beneath the later Persian and Hellenistic city have revealed successive construction phases that span several centuries. Each layer records another stage in the city's development. The earliest buildings associated with elite authority were practical rather than magnificent. Large rectangular halls built from local stone and timber stood above ordinary houses. Their central hearths suggest spaces where rulers received visitors, held councils, and conducted ceremonies that reinforced their status before assembled followers. These were not yet the vast palaces that later generations would associate with powerful kings. Instead, they reflected a society in transition. Authority remained personal. Kings ruled because influential families accepted their leadership. Prestige depended upon maintaining loyalty, rewarding supporters, protecting communities, and demonstrating success in both peace and war. As the centuries passed, these early royal residences expanded. Stone foundations became stronger. Walls grew thicker. Columns appeared. Separate administrative areas emerged alongside ceremonial halls. Storage facilities multiplied. What had once served as the household of a regional ruler gradually evolved into the administrative center of an increasingly organized kingdom. The city itself reflected these changes. Defensive walls surrounded larger areas. Craft workshops expanded beyond their original districts. Markets attracted merchants from greater distances. Population steadily increased. Every generation added something new: a street, a workshop, a sanctuary, a fortified gate. Together, these countless individual decisions reshaped Sardis into one of Anatolia's most important cities. The archaeological record also reveals continuous improvement in everyday craftsmanship. Pottery produced during these centuries became increasingly refined. Earlier handmade vessels slowly gave way to wheel-made ceramics fired with greater precision. The familiar gray and black wares later associated with Lydia began appearing in growing quantities. Uniformity suggests specialized workshops. Specialized workshops suggest professional artisans. Professional artisans imply a prosperous economy capable of supporting skilled labor beyond simple subsistence farming. Imported pottery provides another fascinating clue. Fragments originating from Greek workshops begin appearing among local ceramics during the 9th century BC. These discoveries reveal expanding commercial relationships across the Aegean. The exchange was never one-sided. Greek merchants carried their goods eastward. Lydian traders exported agricultural products, metals, textiles, and crafted objects westward. Trade linked societies long before political alliances or military conflicts brought them into closer contact. Every imported vessel represented more than commerce. It represented conversation, negotiation, observation. Foreign visitors carried unfamiliar customs. Local craftsmen examined foreign techniques. Religious ideas spread quietly alongside commercial exchange. The frontier between cultures remained remarkably porous. One of the most enduring traditions associated with the Heraclid dynasty concerned its claimed descent from Heracles. To Greek audiences, such ancestry immediately conveyed legitimacy. Heracles embodied strength, endurance, courage, and divine favor. A ruler connected to him inherited symbolic authority before uttering a single command. Modern historians do not treat these claims as literal genealogy. Instead, they ask why such a tradition emerged. One possibility lies in diplomacy. As Lydia strengthened its relationships with Greek communities along the coast, connecting the royal family to a famous Greek hero created valuable cultural bridges. It provided common ground between neighboring civilizations without erasing Lydia's own Anatolian identity. Another possibility reflects political symbolism. Successful kings often sought ancestry linking them to gods or legendary heroes. Throughout the ancient Near East, rulers claimed divine approval in many different forms. Egyptian pharaohs traced connections to the gods. Mesopotamian kings emphasized sacred selection. Greek dynasties invoked heroic ancestors. The Heraclid tradition fits comfortably within this wider ancient pattern. Religion and politics remained inseparable. Royal ceremonies reinforced sacred authority. Sacred authority strengthened political obedience. Neither functioned effectively without the other. Cybele, the great mother goddess, remained central throughout this period. Her sanctuaries grew in importance as royal patronage increased. Kings presented themselves as her protectors. Festivals honoring the goddess united communities drawn from across the kingdom. Offerings accumulated over generations. Bronze figurines, ceramic vessels, jewelry, weapons dedicated after successful campaigns. Each object reflected gratitude, hope, or loyalty. Temple complexes themselves gradually became economic centers. Agricultural estates supported priests. Craftsmen supplied ritual equipment. Pilgrims stimulated local markets. Religion influenced every aspect of society. Meanwhile, Greek religious influences continued entering Lydia through peaceful contact. Apollo, Zeus, other Greek deities found worshippers alongside older Anatolian traditions. Architectural details borrowed from Greek temples appeared within Lydian sanctuaries. Yet these influences rarely displaced existing beliefs. Instead, they blended into uniquely Lydian expressions of worship. This remarkable openness to cultural adaptation became one of Lydia's defining characteristics. The kingdom did not fear outside ideas. It evaluated them, selected useful elements, and incorporated them into its own traditions. Political organization matured alongside religious development. Evidence suggests that provincial administration gradually became more sophisticated during the later Heraclid period. Seal impressions recovered from Sardis reveal growing bureaucratic activity. Official symbols authenticated goods, recorded transactions, identified administrative authority. Although literacy remained limited compared with later empires, written communication slowly gained importance. Clay ceilings protected containers, marked ownership, and helped organize expanding economic activity. Storage facilities discovered near administrative buildings indicate systematic collection of agricultural surplus. Grain, oil, wine, these supplies supported both royal households and military forces. They also provided emergency reserves during years of poor harvest. A kingdom capable of storing food centrally possessed enormous advantages over fragmented communities dependent solely upon local production. Military organization continued evolving as well. Ironworking spread more widely across Western Anatolia. Weapons became stronger, more durable, more numerous. Blacksmiths occupied increasingly important positions within society. Their knowledge transformed raw ore into tools for farming, construction, and warfare. The introduction of iron did not instantly replace bronze. For generations, both metals remained in use. Bronze retained advantages for decorative work, ceremonial equipment, and certain forms of armor. Iron gradually assumed greater importance wherever strength and durability mattered most. Swords, spears, axes, agricultural blades. Each technological improvement enhanced both economic productivity and military effectiveness. Horse breeding expanded into an organized enterprise. The broad plains surrounding Sardis proved exceptionally suitable for raising large numbers of animals. Selective breeding improved endurance, speed, and temperament. Young nobles learned riding from an early age. Mounted warriors became symbols of prestige. Military commanders increasingly relied upon cavalry for reconnaissance, rapid communication, and battlefield maneuver. Unlike many neighboring societies still emphasizing infantry, Lydia recognized the strategic value of mounted forces remarkably early. This advantage would later become famous throughout the Mediterranean. Royal burial practices evolved alongside political authority. The tumuli surrounding Sardis steadily increased in size. What began as relatively modest earth mounds eventually became monumental constructions dominating the landscape. Their sheer scale projected royal prestige far beyond death. Travelers approaching the capital could see these enormous burial monuments from considerable distances. They communicated power without requiring a single spoken word. Inside many tombs, archaeologists have uncovered extraordinary collections of grave goods, weapons carefully arranged beside cremation urns, bronze cauldrons, jewelry, imported ceramics, textiles preserved under rare conditions. Every burial reflected not merely wealth, but carefully organized ceremony. Construction techniques reveal remarkable engineering knowledge. Drainage systems prevented water damage. Stone retaining walls stabilized immense earthen mounds. Interior chambers remained protected beneath thousands of tons of carefully positioned soil. Building such monuments required planning, labor organization, specialized skills, and abundant resources. Only a stable political system could repeatedly undertake projects of this magnitude. The countryside surrounding Sardis prospered alongside the capital. Excavations across the Hermus Valley reveal numerous fortified settlements dating to the later Heraclid centuries. Many share similar construction methods, comparable defensive layouts, related pottery styles. Together, they suggest increasing coordination directed from the royal center. Agricultural installations expanded dramatically. Large storage buildings appear at multiple rural sites. Grinding facilities increased in scale. Irrigation systems improved productivity across fertile lowlands. These developments reflect organized investment rather than isolated local effort. Trade flourished as security improved. Merchants traveling between the Anatolian interior and the Aegean increasingly passed through Lydian territory. Roads followed river valleys. Caravans transported metals, livestock, grain, wine, timber, luxury goods. Foreign products entered Sardis from astonishing distances. Phoenician glass, Greek pottery, exotic ornaments. Each imported object testified to expanding commercial networks reaching across the eastern Mediterranean. The royal court actively encouraged this exchange. Standardized weights simplified transactions. Administrative oversight increased confidence among merchants. Protected trade generated taxes. Taxes strengthened royale finance. Royale finance funded infrastructure. Infrastructure encouraged further trade. It became a cycle of prosperity. Music also occupied an important place within Lydian culture. Although no written musical compositions survive, Greek writers repeatedly praised, or sometimes criticized, the distinctive sound of Lydian music. The so-called Lydian mode became famous throughout the ancient world. To Greek ears, it possessed an emotional quality unlike their own traditional scales. Ancient philosophers debated its psychological effects. Some considered it noble. Others believed it stirred excessive emotion. Regardless of their opinions, the association between Lydia and innovative musical traditions remained remarkably strong. Music accompanied religious festivals, royal ceremonies, military celebrations, family gatherings. It reinforced memory in an age when oral tradition preserved much of history. Songs carried genealogies, heroic tales, sacred stories. The identity of a people often survived through voices long before it appeared in writing. Despite growing prosperity, challenges remained constant. Neighboring kingdoms competed for influence. Tribal groups moved across Anatolia. Trade routes shifted as political circumstances changed. No ruler could assume permanent security. Success depended upon constant adaptation. Some names preserved by later historians may represent genuine rulers from these centuries. Among them appears Sardis, a king remembered in Greek tradition whose existence finds intriguing support within Assyrian records. Another ruler, Sardis, appears associated with conflicts involving Greek coastal cities. Although the surviving evidence remains incomplete, these scattered references remind us that Lydia was already becoming visible upon the wider international stage. The Assyrian Empire, then one of the greatest powers in the Near East, recognized rulers in Western Anatolia significant enough to mention within its own diplomatic records. That alone demonstrates how far Lydia had advanced since the uncertain days following the Bronze Age collapse. By the 8th century BC, Sardis had become much more than a regional settlement. Its rulers commanded armies, collected tribute, maintained diplomatique contact, oversaw expanding trade, directed ambitious construction projects. Yet beneath this impressive stability, tensions quietly accumulated. Powerful noble families possessed extensive estates. Military commanders controlled loyal followers. Regional elites sometimes pursued interests differing from those of the royal court. No kingdom remained immune to internal rivalries. The later Greek tradition preserves one final Heraclid king whose reign would forever change Lydian history. His name was Candace, remembered not primarily for military victories, nor administrative reforms, but for a decision inside the royal palace that ancient writers believed altered the destiny of an entire kingdom. Behind the famous legend, historians see something deeper, a period when royal authority weakened, external dangers increased, powerful aristocratic families gained confidence, and the balance sustaining Heraclid rule began to fracture. The kingdom stood at a crossroads. Its institutions were strong, its economy prosperous, its capital magnificent. But history often changes not when civilizations are weakest. Instead, it changes precisely when success convinces rulers that the foundations beneath them can never shift. The Heraclid dynasty had guided Lydia through centuries of growth. Soon, another family would inherit everything they had built and carry the kingdom toward even greater heights, while unknowingly setting it on the path toward its greatest triumphs and its final downfall. For generations, the Heraclid kings had ruled from Sardis, presiding over a kingdom that had grown stronger with every passing century. Their authority rested upon ancient traditions, respected institutions, loyal noble families, and the belief that the gods themselves had sanctioned their rule. To later generations, it may have seemed that such a dynasty would endure forever. Yet history rarely grants permanence to even the most established kingdoms. Often, the greatest political transformations begin not on distant battlefields, but inside palace walls. Around 680 BC, according to Greek tradition, the final chapter of the Heraclid dynasty unfolded in circumstances so extraordinary that ancient writers preserved the story for centuries. Herodotus records that King Candace became consumed with admiration for the beauty of his wife. So convinced was he that no woman in the world could rival her appearance, that he insisted another man should witness what only the king himself was permitted to see. That man was Gyges, commander of the royal bodyguard, one of the most trusted officers in the kingdom. Whether every detail of Herodotus' account reflects historical reality remains impossible to know. Ancient historians often shape political events into moral narratives. They sought lessons as much as facts. The dramatic story of hidden chambers, violated privacy, and royal betrayal almost certainly contains literary embellishment. Yet beneath the famous tale lies a political transition that modern historians recognize as entirely real. The Heraclid dynasty ended. Gyges became king, and a new royal house, known as the Cimmerians, took control of Lydia. Contemporary Assyrian records strengthen the historical foundation of these events. They refer to a ruler known as Gugu of Lydia, almost universally identified with Gyges. This external evidence confirms that a king by this name ruled Lydia during the late 8th and early 7th centuries BC. For historians, such independent confirmation is invaluable. It anchors Greek tradition within the wider documentary record of the ancient Near East. When Gyges first appears in history, Lydia was facing growing pressure from multiple directions. Powerful nomadic groups, known as the Cimmerians, had begun moving southward from the Eurasian steppe. Trade routes experienced increasing disruption. Political uncertainty spread across Anatolia. Even prosperous kingdoms could no longer assume lasting security. Archaeological evidence from Sardis supports this atmosphere of mounting tension. Excavations have uncovered fortification improvements dating to the later Heraclid period. Walls strengthened, defensive towers reinforced, storage facilities expanded, weapons accumulated. Such projects required enormous investment. No ruler undertook them without reason. Something had changed. The kingdom was preparing for danger. At the same time, economic evidence hints at growing difficulties. Trade remained active, yet revenues appear to have declined compared with earlier generations. Disruptions farther north affected commercial networks extending toward the Black Sea. Merchants faced greater risks. Caravans required heavier protection. Political instability always carried economic consequences. Gyges himself remains an intriguing figure. Ancient sources preserve remarkably little about his early life. Later traditions associate him with the Myrmnad clan, a wealthy, noble family possessing extensive estates throughout the Hermus Valley. Unlike the royal Heraclids, the Myrmnads had built their influence primarily through land ownership, military service, and especially their renowned horse breeding operations. The fertile plains surrounding Sardis produced exceptional cavalry mounts. Control over these resources translated directly into political influence. In an age before permanent standing armies, noble families capable of supplying mounted warriors possessed enormous importance. Kings relied upon them. Military campaigns depended upon them. Royal authority required their cooperation. This balance between monarchy and aristocracy had sustained Lydia for centuries. Now, it was beginning to shift. Whatever happened inside the palace, Gyges' rise to power clearly involved more than one ambitious officer acting alone. Successful coups rarely succeed without broader support. Powerful nobles, senior military commanders, administrative officials, all likely played roles in the transition. The speed with which Gyges secured control strongly suggests careful preparation. Once Candals disappeared from the political stage, loyal supporters moved quickly. Key positions inside the palace were occupied. Royal guards changed allegiance. Communication routes fell under new supervision. Resistance remained surprisingly limited inside Sardis itself. This efficiency reflects organization rather than improvisation. Ancient tradition remembers the queen as playing a decisive role. According to Herodotus, after discovering that Gyges had secretly observed her, she confronted him with an impossible choice. Either kill the king or die yourself. Whether this dramatic confrontation occurred exactly as described remains uncertain. Yet historians recognize that royal marriage carried profound political significance throughout the ancient Near East. By marrying the widow of the previous king, a successful usurper could strengthen claims to legitimacy. The marriage symbolized continuity rather than revolution. The kingdom still possessed a queen. The royal household continued. Government endured. For ordinary subjects, such symbolism mattered enormously. Political stability often depended as much upon appearances as reality. Gyges appears to have understood this perfectly. His marriage to the queen, whatever her personal wishes may have been, reinforced the transition at precisely the moment legitimacy mattered most. Not everyone accepted the new king. Across Lydia, families connected to the Heraclids challenged Gyges' authority. Some noble houses possessed ancient claims of their own. Others simply opposed the sudden rise of the Myrmnads. Rebellions erupted in several regions. Military action became unavoidable. Fortresses guarding important approaches into Lydia assumed renewed strategic importance. One such location stood at Dasilium, controlling vital routes linking western Anatolia with the interior. Archaeological excavations there have uncovered arrowheads, spear points, and other evidence of violent conflict dating to precisely this turbulent period. Although the surviving evidence cannot reconstruct every battle, it confirms that Gyges' accession was far from universally accepted. The new king fought not only to gain a throne, but to keep it. Victory required more than military success. It required convincing both subjects and neighboring kingdoms that divine order had not been overturned. Throughout Anatolia, kingship carried sacred significance. A ruler governed with the favor of the gods. To overthrow such a king risked provoking divine anger. Even successful conquerors needed religious legitimacy. Gyges, therefore, turned toward one of the most respected religious institutions in the Greek world, the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. His decision reflected remarkable political intelligence. Delphi possessed influence extending far beyond Greece itself. Kings, tyrants, merchants, entire cities sought guidance from its oracle. A favorable response would strengthen Gyges both domestically and internationally. The embassy dispatched from Sardis carried gifts worthy of a wealthy kingdom. Ancient writers describe magnificent offerings, golden bowls, silver vessels, objects crafted with extraordinary skill. Their value extended beyond material wealth. They demonstrated seriousness, respect, and confidence. Lavish dedications announced to every visitor that Lydia remained prosperous despite recent political upheaval. The response delivered by the Pythia proved both reassuring and unsettling. According to Greek tradition, Apollo confirmed Gyges as the rightful king of Lydia. Divine approval had been granted. The gods accepted the new dynasty. For Gyges, this represented priceless political capital. Yet the oracle also delivered a warning. Retribution for the Heraclids, it declared, would fall upon the fifth generation of Gyges' descendants. At the time, such a prophecy may have seemed comfortably distant. 5 generations stretched far into the future. The immediate concern involved stabilizing the kingdom. Only later would historians notice the remarkable coincidence that the 5th Myrmnad ruler, Croesus, eventually lost his kingdom to Cyrus the Great. Whether coincidence, literary construction, or genuine prophecy, the story became inseparable from Lydia's historical memory. Greek communities along the Anatolian coast also watched events carefully. Many had maintained long commercial relationships with Lydia. Political uncertainty threatened trade. Delphi's recognition of Gyges encouraged acceptance of the new regime. Diplomatic relationships resumed. Merchants returned. Economic life stabilized more quickly than might otherwise have occurred. Within Sardis, construction projects began almost immediately. Archaeological evidence reveals extensive rebuilding during the early Myrmnad period. Administrative quarters expanded. Palace complexes underwent renovation. Storage facilities multiplied. These developments reflected more than royal vanity. They demonstrate confidence. A ruler uncertain of his position rarely invests heavily in monumental construction. Gyges intended to govern for the long term. The kingdom's economic foundations also received renewed attention. Particular emphasis fell upon the rivers flowing through Lydian territory. Among them, the Pactolus held special importance. Its waters carried natural deposits of electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. People had gathered these precious particles for generations. Under Gyges, extraction became more organized. Royal supervision increased. Mining operations expanded. The wealth flowing into Sardis steadily multiplied. Nearby silver deposits likewise came under closer royal administration. Mining camps grew larger. Smelting facilities improved. Transport networks carried refined metals toward the capital. These resources financed nearly every aspect of royal policy. Military expansion, construction, diplomacy, administrative reform. Without Lydia's extraordinary mineral wealth, none of the achievements associated with the Myrmidid dynasty would have been possible. Yet, Gyges understood that wealth alone guaranteed nothing. It had to be protected, and protection required military strength. The new king, therefore, turned his attention toward the western coast. There, wealthy Greek city-states controlled valuable ports, commercial routes, and agricultural territories. Some had enjoyed considerable independence during the final years of Heraclid rule. Gyges intended to change that. Among the most important stood Miletus, one of the richest and most influential Greek cities in the eastern Mediterranean. Its ships traded across vast distances. Its merchants possessed connections reaching Egypt, Cyprus, the Levant, and beyond. Control over relations with Miletus carried enormous strategic significance. Rather than launching reckless assaults, Gyges adopted a more methodical approach. Military pressure combined with economic strategy. Cavalry units disrupted movement beyond the city walls. Supply routes came under increasing threat. The objective extended beyond battlefield victory. It sought gradual exhaustion. Lydian military organization itself had changed noticeably. Instead of relying entirely upon temporary levies assembled during emergencies, Gyges expanded the kingdom's professional forces. Experienced soldiers formed permanent units. Royal workshops produced standardized weapons. Training became more systematic. Regular payment strengthened loyalty. Such reforms required considerable expense. Fortunately, Lydia's growing treasury could support them. The cavalry remained the pride of the army. Mounted on carefully bred horses from the Hermus Valley, Lydian horsemen combined speed with discipline. They carried spears, composite bows, iron swords. Distinctive pointed caps identified them across the battlefield. Unlike slower infantry formations, cavalry could strike unexpectedly, withdraw before sustaining heavy losses, and return again from another direction. Against many opponents, such mobility proved decisive. Military engineers also expanded their capabilities. Knowledge traveled across the Near East through diplomacy, trade, and warfare. Lydian craftsmen studied foreign siege techniques, earthworks, siege towers, protective shelters. mechanical devices designed to pressure fortified cities, rather than depending upon brute force alone. Sieges increasingly became contests of engineering. The campaign against Miletus stretched across several seasons. Its duration demonstrates both the city's formidable defenses and Gyges' determination. Instead of risking catastrophic frontal assaults, Lydian forces maintained pressure while gradually tightening control over surrounding territory. Eventually, negotiations achieved what repeated attacks had not. Miletus accepted Lydian supremacy. Importantly, the settlement remained relatively moderate. The city retained considerable internal autonomy. Commercial privileges continued. Tribute replaced outright destruction. This approach reflected practical statecraft. Gyges recognized that prosperous Greek cities generated wealth. Ruined cities generated little besides resentment. Victory therefore strengthened rather than crippled regional commerce. Encouraged by success, the king turned toward additional coastal centers. Smyrna, Colophon. Other communities faced growing Lydian influence. Each campaign refined military techniques further. Infantry, cavalry, engineering, logistics all became increasingly coordinated. The kingdom itself transformed alongside its expanding army. Professional soldiers formed an entirely new social group. Many served the crown for years rather than only during emergencies. Veterans received rewards, land grants, prestige, royal favor. Their fortunes became directly connected to continued success under the Myrmnad dynasty. Weapons production expanded dramatically. Royal workshops employed skilled metal workers producing standardized equipment in unprecedented quantities. Horse breeding developed into one of Lydia's most valuable industries. Entire estates specialized in raising animals destined for military service. Blacksmiths, leatherworkers, wheelwrights, armors. Every campaign stimulated further economic activity. War and prosperity became closely intertwined as Gyges strengthened his kingdom. Few could have imagined that the greatest transformation in Lydian history had not yet arrived. The rivers flowing quietly through the Hermus Valley still concealed an innovation that would reshape commerce not only across Anatolia, but eventually across nearly the entire ancient world. And from the workshops of Sardis, a simple piece of stamped metal would soon change human history forever. By the middle of the 7th century BC, Sardis had become a city unlike any other in western Anatolia. Its streets were busier than they had ever been before. Caravans arrived from the interior carrying copper, iron, timber, livestock, and grain. Merchants from the Aegean unloaded pottery, olive oil, wine, finely crafted goods, and luxury product from distant islands. Languages from across the eastern Mediterranean could be heard inside its markets. Every journey seemed to pass through Lydia. Every successful exchange added another measure of prosperity to the kingdom. Yet despite this remarkable growth, commerce throughout the ancient world still relied upon systems that were slow, complicated, and often uncertain. Buying and selling required patience, experience, and trust. When merchants met to exchange goods, they frequently depended on barter. Grain might be traded for livestock, fine cloth for bronze tools, olive oil for timber, Each agreement required careful negotiation because no universal standard determined whether one item truly equaled another in value. When precious metals entered these transactions, the process remained equally demanding. Gold and silver already possessed recognized value, but every payment required weighing, testing, and constant discussion. A merchant receiving a lump of electrum could never assume that its composition matched another piece of similar size. Natural electrum varied widely. Some contained high percentages of gold. Others held considerably more silver. Appearances alone revealed very little. Portable scales, therefore, became essential equipment. Alongside them traveled standardized weights, carefully calibrated according to local systems. Merchants also carried touchstones, simple but remarkably effective tools used to test the purity of precious metals. Every important transaction became an exercise in verification. Weight had to be confirmed, purity examined, value debated. Only then could business proceed. For experienced traders, these procedures were familiar. For everyone else, they created opportunities for misunderstanding, delay, and fraud. Commercial success demanded expertise that not every buyer or seller possessed. As Lydia's economy expanded, these limitations became increasingly obvious. Trade volumes grew larger every year. Merchants traveled farther than ever before. Commercial relationships connected dozens of different political communities. Each possessed its own customs, its own standards, its own expectations. Something simpler was needed, something capable of replacing endless negotiation with immediate confidence. The answer would emerge from the royal workshops of Sardis. Its origins lay not in philosophy nor political theory, but in practical necessity. The Pactolus River continued delivering extraordinary quantities of electrum into Lydian hands. Royal officials supervised increasingly organized extraction. Workers washed river sediments, collected precious particles, refined them, and transported the resulting metal into secure storage facilities within the capital. By approximately 650 BC, the royal treasury possessed immense reserves of electrum, far more than traditional jewelry, ceremonial objects, or diplomatic gifts could consume. This abundance encouraged experimentation. If electrum already represented wealth, could it also become something more useful? Somewhere inside the workshops serving the Lydian crown, craftsmen began developing an idea unlike anything the ancient world had previously seen. Instead of treating precious metal merely as raw material, why not transform it into standardized units whose weight and quality the government itself guaranteed? Such an object would eliminate the need for constant weighing. Merchants would no longer argue over purity. Value would become immediately recognizable. Trust could travel alongside the metal itself. The concept seems almost obvious today. At the time, it represented a revolutionary leap in economic thinking. The earliest Lydian coins appeared sometime during the second half of the 7th century BC. Most historians place their production between approximately 650 and 630 BC. They look very different from modern coins. Perfect circles had not yet become standard. Many resembled small beans or irregular rounded pieces of metal. Their appearance reflected practical manufacturing methods rather than artistic perfection. Yet despite their simple shape, they carried extraordinary significance. Each piece possessed carefully controlled weight. Each originated under royal supervision. Each bore an identifying mark guaranteeing official approval. For the first time in history, value itself had acquired a recognizable form. Archaeological discoveries have allowed modern researchers to study these earliest coins in remarkable detail. One of the most important collections emerged during excavations at the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. There, beneath later construction, archaeologists uncovered foundation deposits containing dozens of early electrum coins. Their presence suggests they had already become objects worthy of religious dedication, not merely tools of commerce, but symbols of wealth, authority, and divine blessing. Analysis revealed remarkable consistency. Although handcrafted, their weights followed carefully maintained standards. Most corresponded to what became known as the Lydian stater, approximately 14 grams. Minor variations existed, yet the overall precision demonstrates organized production rather than random experimentation. Even more impressive was their composition. Natural electrum varies considerably in gold content. Nevertheless, each coin represented an officially accepted standard. The royal authority behind it mattered more than the exact percentage of gold or silver contained within. Confidence had shifted from the metal alone to the institution guaranteeing it. Perhaps the most famous feature of these early coins was the image impressed upon their surface. A lion's head, bold, powerful, instantly recognizable. The lion already occupied an important place within Lydian royal symbolism. It represented strength, authority, protection. It also carried religious associations connected with Cybele, whose sacred animals often included lions. By stamping this image onto every coin, the monarchy accomplished something remarkable. Every transaction became a visible reminder of royal authority. Every merchant handling Lydian currency encountered the symbol of the kingdom itself. Money had become political, economic, and symbolic all at once. Creating these coins demanded sophisticated craftsmanship. The process began with refining raw electrum. Although naturally occurring, it often required purification before minting. Metallurgists heated the alloy inside carefully controlled furnaces, removed unwanted impurities, prepared standardized batches suitable for manufacture. Temperature control proved critical. Too much heat damaged the metal. Too little prevented proper shaping. The refined electrum was then poured into molds, each producing blanks of approximately uniform size. Once cooled, these blanks underwent further shaping through hammering. Edges became smoother, dimensions more regular. Finally came the defining step. A carefully engraved die bearing the royal symbol was positioned against the metal. Another punch supported the opposite side. One precise strike from a hammer transferred the image permanently onto the surface. Every successful blow created another officially recognized unit of value. Behind this seemingly simple procedure stood remarkable technical knowledge. Engraving durable bronze dies required exceptional artistic skill. Maintaining consistent striking force demanded experienced craftsmen. Even replacing worn dies without altering official standards required careful supervision. The mint at Sardis quickly became one of the most sophisticated manufacturing centers in the ancient world. quality control formed an essential part of the process. Coins failing weight requirements returned immediately to the furnace. Those displaying imperfect impressions were melted and produced again. Officials regularly tested finished pieces using scales calibrated against royal standards. Touchstones verified metal quality. The monarchy understood an essential principle. Confidence once lost could not easily be restored. If merchants doubted official coinage, the entire system would fail. Reliability, therefore, became the kingdom's greatest economic asset. The practical advantages appeared almost immediately. Merchants no longer needed elaborate weighing equipment for ordinary transactions. A coin's official marks served as a guarantee. Payment became faster. Markets became more efficient. Travel became easier. Large sums could be transported far more conveniently than bulky commodities. Tax collection also changed dramatically. Previously, rulers often received tribute in livestock, grain, manufactured goods, or unshaped precious metals. Every payment required evaluation, storage, transportation. Now taxes could increasingly be specified in standardized monetary units. Royal officials counted rather than negotiated. Administrative efficiency improved throughout the kingdom. Soldiers likewise benefited. Instead of relying entirely upon land grants, food rations, or shares of captured property, professional troops could receive regular monetary payment. Military logistics became simpler. Recruitment became easier. Royal authority strengthened further. The consequences reached far beyond Lydia itself. Foreign merchants quickly recognized the advantages offered by standardized coinage. Greek traders conducting business in Sardis encountered this innovation firsthand. Many carried examples home. Curiosity spread rapidly along the Aegean coast. Cities already dependent upon active commerce understood immediately what such a system could accomplish. Among the earliest to adopt similar practices was Ephesus. Its own electrum coinage soon appeared, featuring symbols associated with Artemis rather than the Lydian lion. Other communities followed. Each adapted the concept to local traditions while preserving the essential innovation. Government guaranteed value. Trade accelerated. Confidence expanded. Before long, the idea crossed the Aegean itself. The island of Aegina introduced silver coinage around the beginning of the 6th century BC. Other Greek states gradually followed. Within remarkably few generations, coined money spread across much of the Mediterranean. Its origins remained firmly rooted beside the rivers of Lydia. Technological influence accompanied monetary expansion. The die-striking techniques perfected at Sardis became standard practice for centuries. Craftsmen throughout the ancient world learned to engrave dies, prepare blanks, strike coins, maintain official standards. The methods developed inside Lydian workshops continued with surprisingly little fundamental change through Greek, Roman, medieval, and even early modern coin production. The symbolism introduced by Lydia also proved enduring. Animals, royal emblems, sacred images, portraits. Every civilization adapting coinage soon discovered that money communicated political messages as effectively as economic value. A coin traveled farther than nearly any official proclamation. Every exchange carried an image of authority into countless hands. Law adapted alongside economics. Counterfeiting became a serious crime. Standard weights acquired legal definitions. Commercial disputes increasingly involved monetary contracts rather than simple barter. Credit arrangements expanded. Loans became easier to calculate. Financial thinking itself grew more sophisticated. Money altered not merely trade, but the structure of society. The mining industry expanded in response to growing demand. Operations along the Pactolus intensified. Additional workers entered royal service. Smelting facilities multiplied. Transportation systems improved. Entire communities depended directly upon the production of precious metals destined for the mint. Artisans benefited as well. Craft specialists could now assign fixed prices to their products. A bronze tool, a woven garment, a carved wooden chest. Each acquired monetary value independent of complicated barter negotiations. Markets became more transparent. Consumers compared prices more easily. Competition increased. Economic activity accelerated. Early financial services also began appearing. Traveling merchants carrying substantial wealth required secure storage. Money changers offered protection, verified authenticity, exchanged different monetary standards. Although primitive compared with later banking institutions, these services represented another important step toward increasingly complex commercial systems. The influence of Lydian coinage eventually extended even into diplomacy. Foreign rulers admired the kingdom's technological achievement. Coins themselves became prestigious gifts, visible evidence of advanced craftsmanship, administrative sophistication, and abundant wealth. No longer was Lydia known merely for fertile valleys and rich rivers. It had become the birthplace of an innovation destined to transform civilizations. Yet the kingdom's prosperity also attracted attention from ambitious neighbors. Extraordinary wealth rarely remains unnoticed for long. Powerful states beyond Lydia's borders watched Sardis with increasing interest. Some admired its success. Others calculated how that wealth might someday become their own. For the moment, however, the kingdom stood at the height of confidence. Its treasury overflowed. Its merchants dominated regional commerce. Its armies continued growing stronger. A new generation prepared to inherit this flourishing realm. Among them was a prince named Aliats, a ruler whose long reign would carry Lydia to even greater power, while confronting threats unlike any the kingdom had ever faced. When Aliats became king around 610 BC, he inherited a kingdom that was wealthier than any of his predecessors could have imagined. The royal treasury contained increasing quantities of precious metals. Trade flowed steadily through Sardis. The army had been strengthened through decades of reform. The new system of coin money was beginning to transform commerce throughout the eastern Mediterranean. From a distance, Lydia appeared stronger than ever. But beneath that prosperity, danger was approaching. Unlike the Greek cities along the coast, whose conflicts often centered on fortified towns and territorial disputes, the next enemy facing Lydia came from an entirely different world, far beyond the mountains of Anatolia, across the vast grasslands stretching toward the Black Sea, lived nomadic peoples whose entire way of life revolved around the horse. They possessed no great cities, no monumental temples, no permanent capitals comparable to Sardis. Instead, their strength came from movement. Entire communities traveled across enormous distances. Their warriors could appear without warning, strike with devastating speed, and disappear before organized resistance could form. Among these peoples, one name inspired particular fear throughout the ancient Near East: the Cimmerians. Ancient Assyrian records, Greek historical traditions, and archaeological discoveries together allow historians to reconstruct the broad outline of their migrations. Originally inhabiting the Pontic steppe north of the Black Sea, they themselves were displaced when new nomadic groups, especially the Scythians, expanded into their territories. Forced southward, the Cimmerians crossed the Caucasus and entered Anatolia during the late 8th and early 7th centuries BC. Their arrival transformed the political landscape. Kingdoms that had long considered mountain ranges and rivers sufficient protection suddenly faced opponents capable of traveling extraordinary distances with astonishing speed. Traditional defensive strategies often proved ineffective. The Cimmerians did not seek slow territorial expansion through carefully planned sieges. They specialized in rapid raids, destroying settlements, capturing livestock, seizing wealth, before organized armies could fully respond. Ancient descriptions portray them as exceptional horsemen. From childhood, they learned to ride, to hunt, to fight while mounted. Composite bows gave them impressive range. Their mobility allowed them to choose when and where battles would occur. Even heavily armed opponents struggled to force decisive engagements against such elusive enemies. Lydia had already encountered the Cimmerian threat before Alyattes became king, during the reign of Gyges. Cimmerian invasions reached such intensity that ancient sources record the death of the Lydian king himself during one of these conflicts. Although the exact circumstances remain uncertain, the impact upon the kingdom was undeniable. Archaeological excavations within Sardis reveal destruction layers dating to this turbulent period. Burned structures, collapsed walls, scattered weapons, arrowheads whose design matches known Cimmerian examples. These discoveries confirm that the danger described in written sources was tragically real. The invaders succeeded in penetrating parts of Sardis. Yet remarkably, they failed to capture its most important position, the heavily fortified citadel rising above the city. Perched upon steep slopes, protected by formidable natural defenses, the Acropolis resisted. Although lower districts suffered, royal authority survived. The kingdom endured. For Alyattes, this recent history offered an unmistakable lesson. Prosperity meant little if the kingdom could not defend itself. His response would reshape the Lydian military more profoundly than at any previous time, rather than relying solely upon inherited traditions. He expanded, reorganized, and modernized the armed forces with extraordinary determination. The cavalry became his greatest priority. Lydia already possessed an excellent reputation for horse breeding. Now that advantage received unprecedented royal investment. Stud farms across the Hermus Valley expanded dramatically. Carefully selected breeding stock improved both endurance and strength. Experienced trainers refined techniques passed down through generations. The objective extended beyond producing fine horses. It sought to create the finest cavalry force in Anatolia, Professional mounted units received systematic organization, instead of assembling temporary groups whenever danger appeared. Permanent squadrons trained together year-round. Ancient evidence suggests that cavalry formations were organized into relatively standardized units, allowing commanders greater flexibility during campaigns. Discipline increased, coordination improved, experience accumulated rather than disappearing after each military season. Equipment evolved alongside organization. Royal workshops manufactured bronze-scale armor protecting both rider and horse. Iron-tipped lances became standard issue. Composite bows continued, improving through refinements borrowed from neighboring cultures. Helmet designs balanced protection with visibility. Leather harnesses distributed weight more effectively during long marches. Every detail reflected careful attention to battlefield performance. Even the horses themselves received protective equipment. Bronze chamfrons shielded their faces. Leather coverings guarded vulnerable areas without greatly reducing mobility. The sight of heavily armored Lydian cavalry advancing across open ground must have been deeply impressive to contemporary observers. Infantry reforms accompanied cavalry expansion. Traditional heavy formations retained their importance, especially during sieges and defensive operations. Yet alliates recognized that rigid tactics alone could not defeat highly mobile nomadic opponents. Lighter infantry therefore assumed greater significance. Soldiers carrying smaller shields, shorter spears, and improved missile weapons gained increased mobility across difficult terrain. Specialized archer units supported advancing cavalry while providing covering fire during withdrawals. Training became increasingly sophisticated. Combined operations received particular attention. Infantry, archers, and cavalry learned to operate together rather than independently. Signals coordinated movement. Officers developed greater tactical flexibility. Military professionalism reached levels previously unknown in Lydia. Technological innovation remained central throughout these reforms. Lydian craftsmen refined composite bow construction. These remarkable weapons combined wood, horn, and animal sinew into carefully engineered designs capable of storing enormous energy. Properly manufactured composite bows significantly outperformed simple wooden bows, delivering greater range, improved penetration, and superior accuracy. Creating one required months of skilled labor. Different materials had to cure under carefully controlled conditions. Temperature and humidity mattered. Master craftsmen guarded their techniques closely. The investment proved worthwhile. On the battlefield, such bows allowed Lydian forces to challenge nomadic archers using comparable technology. No military reform truly proves itself until tested under combat conditions. That test arrived around 605 BC. Large Cimmerian forces once again entered Anatolia, advancing through territories already weakened by years of instability. Rather than waiting defensively near Sardis, alliates marched northward to intercept them. The confrontation occurred near the ancient city of Pessinus, located within central Anatolia. Although surviving accounts preserve few tactical details, the broad outline emerges through historical reconstruction. Lydian scouts located the advancing Cimmerian force before it reached more densely populated Western territories. This alone represented significant improvement. Earlier invasions often achieved surprise. Now reconnaissance provided valuable warning. Alyattes carefully selected ground favorable to his reorganized army. Mountain passes limited enemy mobility. Elevated positions strengthened archers. Secure infantry formations anchored the battlefield, while cavalry remained free to maneuver. The opening stages followed familiar nomadic patterns. Mounted Cimmerian archers harassed the Lydian lines, seeking weak points, testing reactions, avoiding prolonged close combat. Instead of pursuing recklessly, Lydian commanders maintained discipline. Archers answered missile fire. Infantry held formation. Cavalry waited. Only when opportunities clearly emerged did mounted squadrons launch coordinated attacks. The battle intensified throughout the day. Charges, counter-charges, arrow storms, localized fighting across uneven ground. Neither side relied solely upon brute force. Each sought tactical advantage through movement and timing. Eventually, the Cimmerians attempted one of their most famous maneuvers, the feigned retreat. For centuries, steppe warriors had perfected this technique. A seemingly defeated force withdrew rapidly, tempting enthusiastic pursuers into abandoning disciplined formations. Once sufficiently scattered, the pursuers found themselves surrounded. What appeared to be victory suddenly became disaster. Many experienced armies had fallen victim to this strategy. Alyattes anticipated it, whether through previous experience, intelligence, or careful study of earlier campaigns. He ordered restraint. Lydian cavalry pursued only within carefully defined limits before returning to support the main force. The trap failed. Instead, the withdrawing Cimmerians gradually lost cohesion under sustained pressure, unable to isolate portions of the Lydian army. Their tactical advantage diminished. The outcome proved decisive. Although some Cimmerian groups survived and continued moving elsewhere, their ability to threaten Western Anatolia effectively came to an end. Archaeological evidence supports this conclusion. Following the early 6th century BC, destruction layers associated with major Cimmerian raids become dramatically less common throughout Lydia and neighboring regions. Communities rebuilt. Agriculture recouvrée. Trade resumed with renewed confidence. The psychological importance of this victory cannot be overstated. For decades, the Cimmerians had seemed almost unstoppable. Their raids reached deep into prosperous kingdoms. Even mighty powers struggled against them. Now, Lydia had demonstrated that disciplined organization, professional training, and tactical adaptation could overcome one of the most feared military forces of the age. Alyattes' prestige soared. His authority strengthened both at home and abroad. Veterans returning from the campaign carried stories of victory throughout the kingdom. Royal legitimacy received powerful reinforcement. Military success always influenced politics in the ancient world. A victorious king inspired loyalty. Defeat encouraged rebellion. The triumph over the Cimmerians secured Alyattes' position more effectively than any proclamation ever could. Peace also brought economic rewards. Merchants traveled more confidently. Caravans resumed routes previously considered dangerous. Agricultural production expanded as rural communities no longer feared constant raids. Mining operations intensified. Coin production increased. Every aspect of Lydian prosperity benefited from improved security. Yet the disappearance of one enemy often revealed another. Far to the east, another great power was rising. Unlike the fast-moving Cimmerian raiders, this rival possessed organized government, professional armies, large populations, and ambitions extending across much of the ancient Near East. The Median Empire, the Medes had gradually emerged as one of the dominant powers of Western Asia, centered upon the Iranian plateau. They absorbed neighboring territories while extending influence westward toward Anatolia. Following the weakening of Assyria, their expansion accelerated dramatically. Eventually, Median and Lydian frontiers approached one another. Between them lay valuable territory, rich agricultural land, strategic mountain passes, important trade routes linking east and west. Neither kingdom intended to surrender such advantages voluntarily. The city of Tyria became especially significant, situated near major communication routes. It offered control over movement across central Anatolia. Both Lydia and Media regarded the surrounding region as lying within their legitimate sphere of influence. Diplomatic tension increased. Border incidents multiplied. Small cavalry patrols encountered one another with growing frequency. Initially, neither side sought full-scale war. Minor skirmishes tested strength. Commanders observed enemy tactics. Scouts gathered intelligence. Each kingdom evaluated the other carefully. These limited confrontations revealed important differences. Median cavalry emphasized mounted archery inherited from Iranian and steppe traditions. Lydian forces favored closer coordination between cavalry and infantry. Each possessed strengths. Each searched for weaknesses. Gradually, the conflict expanded. Diplomacy failed. Territorial claims hardened. Neither monarch wished to appear weak before allies or subjects. War became increasingly difficult to avoid. Before long, two of the greatest powers in Western Asia would confront one another in a struggle remembered not only for its battles, but for one extraordinary event in the sky. An event so astonishing that soldiers on both sides believed the gods themselves had intervened, and it would become one of the most famous moments in all of ancient history. By the closing years of the 7th century BC, Lydia had secured its western frontiers, defeated one of the greatest nomadic threats in Anatolia, strengthened its military, and expanded its economic influence farther than ever before. For Alliats, the future appeared full of opportunity, but opportunity and danger often travel together. To the east, another kingdom had also emerged from decades of conflict stronger than before. The Median Empire. The Medes were an Iranian people whose influence had grown steadily after the collapse of Assyrian power. What had once been a collection of tribal groups gradually transformed into one of the largest political powers in the ancient Near East. Their territory stretched across the Iranian plateau and extended westward toward Anatolia. As both Lydia and Media expanded, their frontiers inevitably approached one another. Neither kingdom had originally set out seeking direct confrontation. Distance had once separated them. Now, geography no longer offered that luxury. Between the two powers lay central Anatolia, a land of rolling plains, rugged mountains, river valleys, and fortified settlements. Whoever controlled this region controlled some of the most important overland trade routes connecting Asia with the Aegean. Caravans carrying metals, textiles, livestock, spices, luxury goods, and countless other commodities cross these roads every year. Taxes collected from this commerce enriched royal treasuries. Strategic mountain passes also carried enormous military value. An army moving through Anatolia could not simply march wherever it wished. Natural bottlenecks determined movement. A handful of passes often controlled access to entire regions. Whoever occupied them gained tremendous defensive advantages. The city of Tyria stood at the center of this growing rivalry. Situated near major communication routes, it possessed importance far beyond its size. Both kingdoms viewed the surrounding territory as belonging within their rightful sphere of influence. Neither side wished to retreat. Neither wished to provoke unnecessary war. Yet every patrol, every disputed village, every diplomatic disagreement pushed events toward conflict. At first, encounters remained relatively limited. Mounted scouts from Lydia crossed paths with Median patrols. Local commanders exchanged warnings. Occasional skirmishes broke out. These early clashes provided valuable intelligence. Each side carefully observed the other's strengths. Median cavalry impressed Lydian observers with remarkable mobility. Their horse archers demonstrated skills refined over generations of warfare across the Iranian plateau. They excelled at rapid movement, long-range attacks, and flexible battlefield maneuver. The Lydians answered with equally disciplined cavalry of their own. Though organized differently, their mounted warriors emphasized coordinated charges supported by infantry and missile troops. Superior armor provided protection during close combat. Professional organization increased battlefield discipline. Neither side found easy victory. Years of tension eventually culminated in open war. Around 590 BC, conflict expanded beyond isolated frontier incidents. Large armies entered the field. The confrontation would become one of the defining struggles of the early 6th century BC. Modern estimates regarding army size vary considerably. Ancient writers often exaggerated numbers dramatically. Nevertheless, there is little doubt that both kingdoms committed substantial military resources. For Alliats, defeat threatened everything his predecessors had built. For the Median king Cyaxares, retreat would weaken imperial authority across recently conquered territories. Neither ruler could easily accept compromise before demonstrating military resolve. The Median advance into Anatolia displayed impressive organization. Unlike the fast-moving Cimmerian raiders defeated years earlier, these forces represented a structured imperial army. Infantry, cavalry, supply trains, engineers, administrative officials. The campaign reflected careful planning rather than opportunistic raiding. Alliats recognized immediately that confronting such an army required different strategy. He avoided rushing into decisive battle. Instead, Lydia exploited one of its greatest advantages: familiarity with local terrain. As Median forces advanced westward, Lydian detachments withdrew methodically. Bridges disappeared behind them. Supplies were removed, livestock relocated, fields stripped of resources that might sustain the invaders. Today, historians describe such methods as forms of scorched earth strategy. The objective was not immediate victory. It was exhaustion. An advancing army consumed enormous quantities of food every day. Thousands of soldiers required grain, water, livestock, fuel, pack animals. The farther an invading force moved from its own territory, the more difficult these requirements became. Every mile increased logistical strain. Meanwhile, Lydian cavalry remained constantly active. They avoided unnecessary large-scale engagements. Instead, they attacked supply convoys, captured isolated detachments, observed enemy movement, delivered intelligence back to alliates. The campaign became a contest not merely between armies, but between two entirely different approaches to warfare. For several years, neither side achieved decisive success. Battles occurred. Territory changed hands. Fortresses were occupied and abandoned. Yet complete victory remained elusive. Eventually, both armies converged near the Halys River, known today as the Kızılırmak. The Halys formed one of Anatolia's great natural boundaries. Its broad waters created an ideal defensive line. Here, destiny prepared one of history's most extraordinary moments. The date is generally accepted as May 28th, 585 BC. Remarkably, modern astronomical calculations confirm that a total solar eclipse indeed occurred on that day. This rare alignment between historical records and modern science has made the event one of the best documented episodes of ancient chronology. According to ancient tradition, the Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus had predicted the eclipse beforehand. Whether this claim reflects genuine scientific forecasting or a later legend remains debated among historians. Ancient astronomy had developed considerably by the 6th century BC. Babylonian scholars possessed sophisticated knowledge of celestial cycles. Greek thinkers increasingly studied these observations. Some researchers believe Thales may have estimated the possibility of an eclipse using knowledge acquired from Near Eastern astronomy. Others remained skeptical. Regardless, the eclipse itself unquestionably occurred. The two armies had already begun fighting. Infantry formations clashed along the river valley. Mounted warriors maneuvered across open ground. Archers exchanged volleys. Dust rose into the air. The noise of battle echoed across the landscape. Then, slowly, something impossible seemed to happen. The sunlight began fading. At first, perhaps few noticed, clouds occasionally dimmed the sun. No one expected what followed. Minute by minute, daylight weakened. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. Birds fell silent. Animals became restless. Temperatures dropped. The sky darkened until the battlefield stood beneath an eerie twilight. For soldiers who possessed no modern understanding of orbital mechanics, the experience must have been overwhelming. Many ancient societies regarded eclipses as direct messages from the gods. Celestial order reflected divine order. If the sun itself disappeared during battle, what conclusion could frightened warriors draw except that higher powers had intervened? Ancient sources report that fighting stopped almost immediately. Whether every soldier laid down his weapon at once cannot be verified, but there is broad agreement that both armies interpreted the event as a supernatural warning. Commanders hesitated. Priests offered interpretations. Neither king wished to continue defying what appeared to be unmistakable divine intervention. The total eclipse lasted only a few minutes, yet its psychological impact endured for generations. Even after sunlight returned, the willingness to continue battle had vanished. Neither Lydia nor Media could ignore what thousands of witnesses had just experienced together. Diplomacy replaced warfare. Negotiations began. Religious advisors participated alongside political representatives. Practical considerations supported peace as much as religious belief. Years of campaigning had exhausted both kingdoms. Neither possessed clear strategic advantage. Both faced logistical burdens. Both had reasons to avoid endless conflict. The eclipse simply provided the perfect opportunity. The resulting treaty became one of the most important diplomatic agreements of its era. The Halys River was formally recognized as the boundary separating Lydia and Media. Natural geography became political frontier for decades afterward. This river marked one of the most significant dividing lines in Western Asia. The agreement extended beyond territorial boundaries. Both kingdoms pledged peaceful relations. Commercial exchange resumed. Diplomatic contact continued. Perhaps most importantly, the settlement was reinforced through dynastic marriage. Ancient rulers frequently strengthened treaties by uniting royal families. According to historical tradition, Aliats gave one of his daughters in marriage to Astyages, the son of Cyaxares. Such alliances transformed political agreements into family obligations. Breaking peace now carried personal as well as diplomatic consequences. The treaty demonstrated remarkable statesmanship. Neither side achieved total victory. Neither suffered catastrophic defeat. Instead, two powerful kingdoms accepted compromise at precisely the moment when continued warfare promised diminishing returns. For Lydia, peace in the East opened extraordinary opportunities elsewhere. Military resources previously tied down along the Halys frontier could now return westward. Attention shifted once more toward the prosperous Greek cities lining the Aegean coast. Some had taken advantage of Lydia's eastern commitments to strengthen their own independence. Others expanded influence into neighboring territories. Aliats intended to restore Lydian authority throughout Western Anatolia. His approach reflected lessons learned over decades of warfare. Instead of reckless offensives, campaigns became carefully planned. Supply systems improved. Engineering units accompanied advancing armies. Professional soldiers operated with increasing discipline. The kingdom's wealth provided enormous advantages. Regular taxation supported extended military operations. Royal workshops continuously manufactured weapons. Coinage simplified logistics. Professional troops received reliable payment. Economic innovation and military power reinforced one another. Among the most important objectives stood Smyrna. Its position along the coast gave it considerable commercial significance. Control over Smyrna meant influence over maritime trade, linking the interior with the wider Aegean. The campaign against the city demonstrated just how sophisticated Lydian siege warfare had become. Rather than surrounding the city with little more than temporary camps, royal engineers constructed elaborate earthworks, defensive trenches, protective embankments. and carefully planned siege positions. Supply lines remained secure. Communications between different sections of the army operated efficiently. Siege towers gradually approached the walls. Missile troops maintained constant pressure upon defenders. The operation extended over many months. Patience became a weapon. Instead of risking devastating losses through repeated direct assaults, the Lydians steadily reduced the city's ability to resist. Food supplies diminished. Outside assistance failed to arrive. Psychological pressure mounted. Eventually, resistance collapsed. The conquest of Smyrna strengthened Lydia's influence across the coast. Other cities watched carefully. Some resisted, others negotiated. Many concluded that cooperation offered better prospects than prolonged warfare. The kingdom's reputation now rested upon more than military success alone. It possessed stable administration, growing prosperity, reliable currency, powerful cavalry, skilled engineers, and rulers capable of balancing war with diplomacy. Throughout these years, Sardis itself continued flourishing. Its population expanded, markets grew busier, workshops multiplied. Foreign visitors increasingly described it as one of the richest cities in Anatolia. Its royal treasury accumulated astonishing quantities of precious metals. Gold from the Pactolus, silver from nearby mountains, tribute from subject territories, taxes collected in newly minted coin. Everything pointed toward continued growth. Children born during Aliat's reign entered adulthood, believing Lydia's prosperity almost natural. Many had never known the fear of Cimmerian invasions, nor the uncertainty that had followed the collapse of the Heraclids. To them, stable government, military success, expanding trade, and growing wealth simply defined everyday reality. But history often grants extraordinary prosperity only briefly. Across the eastern horizon, events were unfolding that neither Aliats nor most of his subjects could fully anticipate. Far beyond the Halys River, within lands once ruled by the Medes, a new leader had begun gathering power. His name was Cyrus. In time, the ancient world would remember him as Cyrus the Great. And before many years had passed, the empire he created would challenge every kingdom between Central Asia and the Mediterranean, including Lydia itself. But before that final confrontation, one more king would ascend the throne of Sardis, a ruler whose name would become synonymous with unimaginable wealth, a man whose riches would enter legend, and whose decisions would determine the fate of everything the Lydians had built over 5 centuries. His name was Croesus, and his reign would become the brightest and ultimately the last great age of independent Lydia, when Aliats died around 560 BC. He left behind a kingdom unlike any other in western Anatolia. Its borders were secure, its armies were experienced, its treasury overflowed with precious metals. Its merchants dominated regional trade. Its capital stood as one of the wealthiest cities of the ancient world. Few rulers inherit such favorable circumstances. Even fewer succeed in expanding them. His son, Croesus, would become one of those rare exceptions. Even today, more than 2,500 years later, his name survives as a symbol of extraordinary wealth. The ancient expression, rich as Croesus, did not appear by accident. It reflected the genuine impression he left upon the ancient world. Foreign ambassadors arriving at Sardis found themselves entering a city whose prosperity seemed almost beyond belief. Merchants returned home describing overflowing markets, magnificent buildings, brilliantly crafted jewelry, and royal generosity displayed on a scale few kingdoms could match. Yet Croesus' wealth was not the result of simple good fortune. It rested upon generations of careful development. The fertile Hermus Valley continued producing abundant harvests. Trade routes crossing western Anatolia remained firmly under Lydian control. The kingdom's mines operated at unprecedented levels. And perhaps most importantly, the rivers flowing through Lydia still carried the precious electrum that had transformed Sardis into the birthplace of coined money. Croesus inherited all of these advantages. Then he improved them. One of his earliest priorities involved expanding the extraction of precious metals. The Pactolus River had long supplied gold-bearing sands. Now royal engineers introduced increasingly sophisticated methods to recover even greater quantities. Instead of relying solely upon individual workers washing sediments in shallow water, large-scale hydraulic systems redirected portions of the river through specially designed channels. These artificial waterways slowed the current, allowing heavier particles, including gold, to settle in carefully constructed basins. The process dramatically increased efficiency. Workers no longer depended entirely upon natural river conditions. The flow itself became part of the mining operation. Modern archaeological investigations have identified remains of these ancient hydraulic works near Sardis. Although weathered by more than 2,000 years, they still reveal remarkable engineering skill. Channels carved into the landscape, retaining walls, settling areas. Together, they illustrate the scale of royal investment. This was no longer a small-scale collection of river gold. It had become organized industry. Thousands of workers participated. Administrative records preserved from later periods suggest that mining operations employed enormous labor forces. Some individuals specialized in excavating sediment. Others managed water flow. Skilled metallurgists refined collected material. Inspectors supervised quality. Transport workers carried precious metals under armed protection toward the capital. The operation resembled an industrial enterprise centuries before such concepts normally appear in history. Silver production expanded alongside gold. The nearby Molus Mountains contained valuable ore deposits. Extracting them required dangerous work beneath the earth. Ancient miners developed techniques known today as fire setting. Large fires heated exposed rock until it expanded. Cold water then caused sudden contraction. Cracks spread through the weakened stone, allowing workers armed with bronze and iron tools to remove or more efficiently. The method demanded patience, skill, and courage. Underground mining remained one of the most hazardous occupations in the ancient world. Collapsing tunnels, smoke, poor air quality, and falling rock threatened workers constantly. Yet the rewards justified the effort. Every successful expedition enriched the kingdom. Raw or alone possessed little value. Its transformation required exceptional metallurgical expertise. Inside royal workshops, specialists refined gold and silver using increasingly advanced techniques. Cupellation, one of antiquity's most sophisticated refining methods, allowed separation of precious metals from unwanted materials. The resulting gold achieved remarkable purity. Silver likewise reached standards admired throughout the Mediterranean. Such quality strengthened confidence in Lydian craftsmanship. Merchants trusted products originating from Sardis. That trust became one of the kingdom's greatest commercial assets. Croesus also oversaw an important monetary reform that further enhanced Lydia's reputation. Earlier electrum coins had revolutionized trade, but natural electrum varied in composition. Gold and silver content differed from one source to another, although official guarantees compensated for these variations. Pure metals offered even greater consistency. Under Croesus, the royal mint introduced separate gold and silver coinage. This innovation represented another milestone in monetary history. Gold coins possessed clearly defined value. Silver coins likewise followed precise standards. Commercial calculation became easier. International confidence increased. Many historians regard this reform as one of Croesus' most enduring achievements. Coins produced during his reign display remarkable artistic quality. The famous lion continued appearing, often paired with the image of a bull. Together, these powerful symbols conveyed royal authority, strength, prosperity, and stability. Their designs remained simple compared with later Greek masterpieces. Yet they possessed unmistakable elegance. Every coin leaving Sardis carried the prestige of the Lydian crown into markets across the ancient world. The influence spread rapidly. Greek cities expanded their own minting operations. Neighboring kingdoms observed Lydia's success with growing admiration. Standardized coinage became increasingly common throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Although many states developed distinctive local traditions, the original inspiration remained unmistakable. Its birthplace was Sardis. Prosperity reached far beyond mining and coin production. Lydian textiles became highly prized luxury goods. Royal workshops produced fabrics woven with extraordinary precision. Fine voile, imported silk, brilliant dyes obtained through extensive commercial networks. Each finished garment represented months of labor. Some textiles required pigments extracted from thousands of tiny sea snails collected along the Mediterranean coast. The famous purple dye associated with royalty demanded enormous effort. Only the wealthiest customers could afford such products. Foreign merchants eagerly paid premium prices. Metalworkers achieved equally impressive results. Goldsmiths fashioned necklaces, bracelets, diadems, and ceremonial vessels whose craftsmanship astonished foreign visitors. Excavated examples reveal astonishing technical sophistication. Tiny, granulated decorations, intricate filigree, precisely fitted gemstones. Many techniques required such extraordinary precision that modern jewelers still admire the skill demonstrated by ancient Lydian craftsmen. Luxury objects incorporated materials gathered from astonishing distances. Ivory arrived from Africa. Amber traveled south from the Baltic. Pearls reached Lydia through eastern trade routes. Exotic woods, rare stones, colorful glass. Everything converged upon Sardis. The capital became not merely wealthy, but cosmopolitan. People from different cultures met within its markets every day. ideas moved alongside merchandise. Croesus understood that wealth carried political value only when displayed wisely. Throughout the ancient world, generous gifts established alliances, strengthened diplomatic relationships, and demonstrated prestige. Few rulers embraced this principle more enthusiastically than the king of Lydia. Among the greatest beneficiaries stood the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. The same oracle that had once recognized Gyges now received gifts surpassing almost anything previously dedicated there. Ancient writers describe magnificent offerings sent from Sardis. Golden bowls, massive silver vessels, decorated tripods, exquisitely crafted statues. Each object announced to every visitor that Lydia stood among the richest kingdoms on earth. One offering became especially famous: a magnificent golden lion, constructed from hundreds of pounds of refined gold. Its creation demanded extraordinary cooperation among sculptors, metalworkers, engineers, and artists. A wooden framework formed the interior. Hammered sheets of gold created the exterior. Fine chasing tools produced detailed fur. Powerful muscles, an expressive face. The completed sculpture represented not only royal generosity, but also the technical mastery of Lydian artisans. Travelers visiting Delphi for generations afterward continued admiring these gifts. Their stories carried Lydia's reputation across the Greek world. Croesus also contributed generously to the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of antiquity's greatest sacred sites. The temple underwent major construction during his reign. The king financed impressive marble columns, architectural elements, and decorative sculptures. His patronage strengthened relations with one of the most influential religious centers in Western Anatolia. Religion and diplomacy once again reinforced one another. Pilgrims arriving at these sanctuaries encountered visible evidence of Lydian prosperity. Foreign rulers recognized Croesus as a generous benefactor. Greek cities appreciated royal support. Political goodwill often followed religious generosity. Meanwhile, the court at Sardis attracted visitors from nearly every corner of the eastern Mediterranean. Egyptian ambassadors, Greek philosophers, merchants from Phoenicia, representatives of Babylon, messengers from distant kingdoms, all arrived seeking alliances, commercial agreements, or simply opportunities to witness the famous wealth of Croesus firsthand. Diplomatic exchanges flourished. Relationships with Egypt proved especially valuable. Pharaoh Amasis maintained cordial ties with the Lydian king. Commercial agreements benefited both kingdoms. Egypt exported grain during difficult harvests. Lydia supplied precious metals, luxury goods, and finely crafted products. These exchanges strengthened stability throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The court itself reflected extraordinary cosmopolitanism. Interpreters translated multiple languages. Foreign craftsmen demonstrated unfamiliar techniques. Musicians introduced melodies from distant lands. Religious envoys discussed sacred traditions. Sardis had become one of the great meeting places of the ancient world. Yet Croesus never neglected military strength. Peace required preparation. The Lydian army continued evolving throughout his reign. Heavy cavalry remained its greatest pride. Mounted nobles wore finely crafted bronze armor decorated with gold details. Iron-tipped lances gleamed beneath the Anatolian sun. Well-trained horses responded instantly to subtle commands. Discipline distinguished these cavalry units from many contemporary opponents. Royal workshops continued producing improved weapons. Iron technology advanced steadily. Sword blades became stronger, armor more sophisticated. Protective helmets balanced durability with comfort. Military engineers refined siege equipment inherited from previous generations. Catapults capable of hurling heavy stones appeared alongside improved battering rams. Siege towers grew taller. Protective coverings became stronger. Professional specialists operated increasingly complex machines. Infantry organization also reflected growing professionalism. Permanents soldiers trained régulièrement. Mercenary contingents supplemented local forces. Greek hoplites entered royal service, bringing experience fighting in dense phalanx formations. Scythian archers introduced additional expertise in mounted missile warfare. Foreign specialists enriched Lydian military knowledge. Training grounds outside Sardis echoed with constant activity. Cavalry drills, archery practice, formation exercice, engineers testing siege equipment. Military readiness became a permanent feature of royal administration. The wealth generated by the kingdom made all of this possible. Unlike poorer states forced to disband armies after every campaign, Lydia could sustain professional forces year after year. That capability significantly enhanced diplomatic influence. Potential rivals understood they confronted not temporary militias, but experienced soldiers supported by immense financial resources. The kingdom's administrative machinery expanded accordingly. Officials supervised taxation, mining, coin production, agriculture, trade. Royal scribes maintained detailed records. Provincial governors reported regularly to Sardis. Although much documentation has disappeared across the centuries, archaeological evidence reveals increasingly organized government. Lydia had matured into one of the best administered states in Western Asia. From every perspective, military, economic, diplomatic, cultural, the reign of Croesus represented the highest point of independent Lydian civilization. Few contemporary rulers possessed comparable resources. Fewer still enjoyed such widespread admiration. Yet while prosperity reached its greatest heights, a profound transformation was occurring beyond Lydia's eastern frontier. Far away, a remarkable leader had united the Persians, then conquered the mighty Median Empire itself. His victories came with astonishing speed. Kingdom after kingdom accepted his authority. His armies continued advancing westward. His name spread rapidly across the ancient world. Cyrus, soon to be remembered as Cyrus the Great. At first, Croesus watched these developments with cautious interest. The fall of Media removed a traditional rival. Perhaps, he believed, the new Persian ruler would be content consolidating his eastern conquests. Perhaps the balance of power could continue. History would prove otherwise. The wealth that had made Lydia famous would soon draw the attention of the greatest conqueror of the age, and two extraordinary kings, each among history's most celebrated rulers. were now moving steadily toward a confrontation that would decide the future of Western Anatolia and change the course of ancient history forever. By the middle of the 6th century BC, two remarkable rulers stood at opposite ends of Anatolia. One governed the wealthiest kingdom in the Western world. The other commanded the fastest growing empire the ancient Near East had ever seen. Croesus ruled Lydia from the magnificent city of Sardis. Cyrus ruled Persia after defeating the Medes and bringing together an empire that stretched farther with every passing year. Neither ruler lacked ambition. Neither underestimated the importance of the lands between them. Yet they viewed the world through very different lenses. For Croesus, the balance of power that had existed for generations still seemed possible. Kingdoms competed, borders shifted, diplomacy balanced military strength. No single ruler dominated everything. For Cyrus, the political landscape looked entirely different. The Achaemenid vision of kingship embraced expansion and integration. Conquered territories became provinces. Former kingdoms became parts of a larger imperial system. As Persian authority reached the Pactolus River, the old frontier between Lydia and Media disappeared. Now, Persia itself stood directly beside Lydia. The situation demanded difficult decisions. Historical sources indicate that Croesus did not remain passive. He strengthened alliances with several major powers, including Babylon, Egypt, and Sparta. Each possessed reasons to be cautious about Persian expansion. From Croesus' perspective, acting before Cyrus grew even stronger may have appeared the wiser course. Before beginning his campaign, Croesus once again sought guidance from Delphi. The consultation would become one of the most famous episodes in ancient history. According to Herodotus, the oracle declared, "If Croesus crosses the Halys, he will destroy a great empire." It was an extraordinary statement, powerful, memorable, and deeply ambiguous. Croesus interpreted the words as a promise of Persian defeat. He believed the great empire destined to fall belonged to Cyrus. Only later would history reveal another possibility. Ancient writers also preserve another prophecy, one advising Croesus to beware the day when a mule became king of the Medes. Later generations understood this as a symbolic reference to Cyrus, whose family united Persian and Median ancestry. Whether these stories preserve authentic oracular traditions or later literary reflections, they express a timeless lesson repeatedly emphasized by Greek historians. Prophecy often depends not upon the words themselves, but upon the listener's interpretation. Confident in his alliances, proud of his experienced army, and supported by enormous financial resources, Croesus marched eastward. The Lydian army represented one of the finest military forces assembled in Western Asia. Heavy cavalry remained unmatched. Professional infantry formed disciplined ranks. Greek allies added additional strength. Royal logistics ensured steady supplies. The campaign crossed the Pactolus River into Cappadocia, advancing toward Persian territory. Cyrus responded with remarkable speed. Instead of defending fixed frontier positions, he withdrew strategically, allowing Croesus to move deeper into unfamiliar territory. Persian cavalry constantly harassed the advancing Lydians. Supply routes came under pressure. Scouts shadowed every movement. Rather than offering immediate decisive battle, Cyrus shaped the campaign according to his own strengths. The two armies eventually met near Tyria. The battle proved fierce. Ancient accounts describe determined fighting with heavy casualties on both sides. Modern historians generally conclude that neither army achieved decisive victory. Lydian cavalry performed impressively during the opening stages. Persian formation démonstrait exceptionnelle flexibilité. Neither commander broke the other's army. As campaigning season drew toward its end, Croesus made a decision that would alter history. Following established military practice of the time, he withdrew towards Sardis for the winter. His expectation appears entirely reasonable within the traditions of 6th century BC warfare. Campaigns usually paused during colder months. Armies required rest. Supplies became more difficult to maintain. Allied reinforcements could be summoned. Preparations resumed in spring. Croesus expected time. Cyrus ignored tradition. Instead of suspending operations, the Persian king continued advancing, relentlessly, rapidly, determined to prevent Lydia from rebuilding its strength. This decision reflected one of Cyrus' greatest military advantages. His logistical organization allowed campaigns under conditions many opponents considered impossible. The speed of the Persian advance caught Lydia completely by surprise. Before Croesus could fully reorganize his forces, the Persians approached Sardis itself. A decisive confrontation could no longer be avoided. The final battle occurred on the plains outside the capital. Ancient tradition preserves a fascinating account of Cyrus' tactical innovation, recognizing the formidable reputation of Lydian cavalry. He reportedly placed camels at the front of his army. Horses unfamiliar with the scent of camels became difficult to control. Whether every detail of this story is literally accurate remains debated. Yet ancient sources consistently emphasize that Persian commanders successfully neutralized one of Lydia's greatest military strengths. The battle ended in Persian victory. Croesus withdrew into Sardis, confident that the city's powerful fortifications could withstand a prolonged siege. Sardis occupied an exceptionally strong defensive position. The Acropolis rose high above the surrounding plain. Steep natural slopes protected much of the citadel. Its walls appeared nearly impregnable. For centuries, these defenses had preserved the kingdom during moments of greatest danger. Persian engineers immediately began systematic siege operations. Earthworks advanced toward the walls. Siege equipment arrived. The city became completely surrounded. Inside Sardis, defenders prepared for resistance. Food was rationed, weapons distributed, every available resource organized. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence supporting these desperate preparations. Storage facilities, emergency construction, weapons scattered throughout defensive positions. Everything suggests determined resistance. Then, according to Herodotus, a seemingly insignificant observation changed everything. A Persian soldier noticed one of the defenders accidentally drop his helmet over a steep section of the citadel. Instead of abandoning it, the Lydian climbed down a narrow path, recovered the helmet, then returned safely to the summit. The route, believed too dangerous to require guarding, had revealed itself. Persian scouts investigated carefully. Soon afterward, under cover of darkness, Selected soldiers climbed the same approach, reaching the walls unexpectedly. Whether events unfolded exactly this way cannot be proven, yet the broader reality remains clear. Persian forces discovered a vulnerable point in Sardis defenses. They penetrated the citadel, opened access for additional troops, and organized resistance collapsed with astonishing speed. Archaeology confirms violent fighting inside the city. Burned buildings, broken weapons, arrowheads, collapsed structures. The final hours of independent Lydia left unmistakable traces beneath the soil. Croesus was captured. What happened next became the subject of famous stories. Herodotus describes Cyrus ordering the defeated king placed upon a funeral pyre, only for unexpected rain, sent by Apollo to extinguish the flames. Modern historians generally regard this dramatic episode as legendary rather than historical. Persian traditions concerning conquered rulers often differed significantly. Other evidence suggests Cyrus treated Croesus with considerable respect. Later Persian sources imply that the former king survived, serving as an advisor familiar with Western Anatolia. Such treatment would not have been unusual for Cyrus. Throughout his conquests, he frequently incorporated capable local leaders into imperial administration. Whether Croesus spent his final years as honored counselor or whether his fate remains forever uncertain, the political reality had changed irrevocably. Independent Lydia had come to an end. In 546 BC, after centuries of gradual growth, the kingdom became part of the expanding Persian Empire. Yet conquest did not erase Lydian civilization. Persian administration displayed remarkable pragmatism rather than destroying effective institutions. Imperial officials preserved many of them. Sardis remained an administrative center. The mint continued operating. Trade flourished. Local officials often retained important responsibilities under Persian oversight. The first satrap governing Lydia, Pactolus, inherited a province whose economic value was immediately obvious. The region's mines, agricultural wealth, commercial networks, and strategic location made it one of the empire's most valuable western territories. The famous royal road linking Sardis with Susa transformed communication across the empire, stretching more than 2,000 kilometers. It allowed royal messengers to travel with unprecedented speed. Herodotus famously admired this network, writing that neither snow, rain, heat, nor darkness prevented Persian couriers from completing their journeys. Lydia's role within the imperial economy remained vital. Coin production continued. Trade expanded across an even larger geographical area. Merchants operating from Sardis now enjoyed access to markets extending deep into Asia. Persian tolerance toward local traditions also allowed religious life to continue. The worship of Cybele endured. Greek sanctuaries remained active. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus continued receiving support. Daily life for many ordinary inhabitants changed far less dramatically than the political transformation might suggest. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. In 334 BC, Alexander the Great crossed into Asia Minor. His victory over Persia brought Lydia into another new imperial system. Macedonian administration introduced fresh political structures. Greek language became increasingly prominent. Cities adopted more Hellenistic institutions. Yet Sardis remained important. After Alexander's death, his generals fought bitterly over the empire. Lydia passed successively under the control of Antigonus, Lysimachus, and later the Seleucid kings. Each regime left its own mark. Greek theaters appeared. Gymnasiums educated new generations. Agoras reshaped urban life. Traditional Anatolian customs gradually blended with Hellenistic culture. This process was not simple replacement. It was cultural fusion, Lydian traditions, Greek philosophy, Persian administrative practices, all contributed to a society more diverse than any single civilization alone. Later, the Attalid kings of Pergamon ruled the region. Libraries expanded learning. Artistic patronage flourished. Architecture reached extraordinary sophistication. Former Lydian territories became fully integrated into the vibrant Hellenistic world. Then came Rome. In 133 BC, the kingdom of Pergamon passed into Roman hands. Lydia entered yet another chapter. Roman roads crossed the ancient landscape. Baths, forum, temples, and theaters transformed the cities. Latin joined Greek in official life. Commerce expanded throughout the Mediterranean. Sardis remained prosperous. Its locations still connected east and west. Religion evolved once more. Cybele continued receiving worship, now identified with the Roman Magna Mater. Eastern mystery religions spread. Jewish communities flourished. Eventually, Christianity arrived. The Book of Revelation names Sardis among the famous 7 churches of Asia, a reminder that the ancient Lydian capital remained an important spiritual center long after its kings had disappeared. One of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries at Sardis illustrates this continuity beautifully. Excavations uncovered both an enormous synagogue and a monumental Christian basilica, standing within the same city. These buildings reveal centuries of diverse religious life existing across changing political worlds. Meanwhile, the Lydian language gradually faded. Greek dominated education, administration, literature. Latin gained influence under Roman government. The last known Lydian inscriptions date to approximately the 3rd century AD, after more than 1,000 years. The language quietly disappeared from everyday use. Yet disappearance does not equal oblivion. Much of Lydia survived in different forms. Its artistic traditions influenced neighboring cultures. Its religious practices adapted rather than vanished. Its cities remained inhabited. Its roads continued carrying merchants. Its fields still produced harvests. Its rivers still flowed through the valleys where the first Lydian communities had emerged centuries earlier. Perhaps the kingdom's greatest gift to history proved even more enduring. Coins. Today, they seem ordinary. Small objects pass from hand to hand countless times every day. Yet before Lydia, no civilization had created standardized coinage guaranteed by governmental authority in the way the Lydians did. That innovation transformed commerce forever. Greek cities adopted it. Persian kings expanded it. Rome perfected it. Medieval kingdoms inherited it. Modern monetary systems ultimately trace part of their ancestry back to the workshops of Sardis. The idea seems simple now. A small piece of metal carrying officially guaranteed value, but its consequences reshaped economies across continents. Trade accelerated, markets expanded, governments developed new fiscal systems, military organization changed, banking slowly emerged. Economic history itself took a different path because of an innovation born beside the gold-bearing rivers of Western Anatolia. Modern archaeology has gradually brought this forgotten kingdom back into the light. Excavations at Sardis have uncovered palaces, homes, workshops, temples, coins, jewelry, tools, and inscriptions. Each discovery adds another voice to a civilization that once seemed known only through Greek historians. Scientific analysis has confirmed the sophistication of Lydian metallurgy. Chemical studies reveal remarkable refining techniques. Archaeological surveys map ancient roads, rural settlements, agricultural systems. Linguistes continuent de déchiffrer une inscription, recovering fragments of a language silent for nearly 17 centuries. Every generation of research deepens our understanding. The story of Lydia is not simply the story of wealth, nor merely the story of kings. It is the story of adaptation, of communities that survived the collapse of the Bronze Age, built stability from uncertainty, created institutions that endured for centuries, welcomed ideas from neighboring cultures without losing their own identity, and introduced innovations whose influence reached far beyond their borders. Their kingdom eventually disappeared. Like every ancient state, empires absorbed it. Languages changed. Dynasties ended. But civilizations are measured not only by how long they rule. They are also measured by what they leave behind. The Lydians left behind the world's first true coinage, a tradition of craftsmanship admired across antiquity, a capital that remained important under every empire that followed, and a reminder that even kingdoms eventually conquered can permanently shape human history. Long after their kings were gone, long after their language had fallen silent, long after the last Lydian soldier had laid down his arms, their greatest achievement continued passing from one hand to another, one coin at a time. And through that enduring legacy, the people of ancient Lydia secured a place in history that has never truly faded. The kingdom itself may have vanished, but its influence still echoes through the foundations of the modern world. The story of Lydia had come to an end. Its legacy had not.